The whip had carved her back years ago, but the scars still burned each morning she woke. Freya's fingers moved swiftly across the loom, threads whispering beneath her touch like secrets only she could hear. The market around her was alive, merchants shouting prices, children laughing, the metallic clatter of coins, yet none of it reached her. People passed her stall as if she were invisible, their gazes skimming over the mark on her wrist, a thin, burned scar that screamed what the town refused to forget. To them, she was not a woman. She was a reminder of shame, a slave who dared to walk with her head high. "Move aside, slave," a butcher barked as he brushed past her table. Freya didn't flinch. She simply gathered the pieces of dyed fabric that had fallen to the dust and wiped them clean. Her silence was sharper than any insult she could have thrown back. By noon, the sun baked the market square, but she kept weaving, sweat dripping down her temples. Her fabrics were exquisite, soft as moonlight, colored with herbs she gathered herself, yet she sold them for a handful of copper coins. People wanted her work, not her presence. Word had long spread. The proud slave, they called her. A woman too stubborn to beg, too proud to yield, too broken to be owned. Some admired her courage in secret, others hated her for it. When night came, Freya walked home through the quiet alleys to her small cottage by the market's edge. Inside, a single candle flickered. She dropped her earnings, barely enough for bread, into a wooden box and sank to the floor. Her body ached, but her spirit ached more. She could still see her parents' faces, their screams when Lord Titus's guards dragged them away, their blood staining the stone floor. He had bought her soon after, a frightened girl of 17. For weeks, she scrubbed floors, served wine, endured his leering eyes. Then came the night he entered her chamber. His voice had been low, thick with wine. "You belong to me now, Freya." But she hadn't bowed. "I belong to no one." The slap that followed had knocked her to the ground, yet even through tears she spat the blood from her mouth and glared up at him. "You may break my body," she had whispered, "but you will never have my worth." By dawn she was whipped without mercy and thrown out of his manor, stripped of her place, her rations, her dignity in the eyes of the world. But as she stood beneath the open sky with nothing but her torn dress, Freya smiled. For the first time she was free, not by chains broken but by spirit unbroken. Now, years later, she lived quietly. She shared her crust of bread with hungry pups and stitched clothes for mothers who could not pay. She did these things without expecting thanks, perhaps because kindness was the only thing left she could give without losing herself. And though she did not know it yet, there was something in Freya's soul the moon goddess recognized, a light too fierce to die that would change her fate forever. Far away from Freya's quiet cottage, the Alpha King's court loomed beneath the pale glow of dawn, its marble towers catching the first light like blades of gold. Servants moved quietly through the long corridors, their steps hushed, for everyone knew. The Queen Mother was still recovering, and the Alpha King had forbidden noise near her chambers. Behind her heavy curtains, the scent of herbs filled the air. Queen Catherine lay against her pillows, her skin pale but her eyes sharp and thoughtful. Years of rule had not softened her spirit, though her body grew frail. She had seen kings rise and fall, battles fought and won, and even death himself retreat once from her bedside. But as she watched her son now standing tall by her window, she felt the shadow of time closing in. Eros was every inch his father's son, broad-shouldered, silent, powerful. Yet behind those amber eyes was a loneliness she could not reach. He stood with arms crossed, gazing out over the training fields where warriors sparred below. "You summoned me, Mother," he said quietly, his tone respectful but distant. Catherine studied him for a long moment before speaking. "Yes, my son. Sit with me." He obeyed, though reluctantly, pulling a chair beside her bed. She reached for his hand, large, calloused, trembling slightly beneath her frail fingers. "I have lived long enough to see peace in our land, she began softly, but peace means little to a mother when her child is alone. He turned his gaze away. I am not alone, mother. I have my people. She smiled sadly. A kingdom cannot warm your heart at night, Eros. You have no Luna, no one to share your burdens. It grieves me that I may die without seeing you loved. A shadow crossed his face. Love. He gave a bitter chuckle. What is love to a king? Women do not love me. They love the throne, the jewels, the power. They look at me and see gold, not blood. They bow not out of affection, but out of fear. Catherine's eyes softened with pain. You have grown too cold, my son. You fear to love because of the crown upon your head. But even a king's heart must beat for something more than duty. He rose abruptly, walking to the window again. Outside, the sky was turning silver with dawn. My duty is my love, he said firmly. If I give my heart, I risk the throne. I cannot afford that weakness. Catherine's voice broke. Weakness? Is it weakness to long for warmth, to wish for a mate who sees the man before the title? Eros's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. The silence between them stretched, heavy, aching, filled with years of unsaid things. Finally she spoke again, her tone quiet, but resolute. Then if you will not seek her, I will. His head snapped toward her. What? I will find her, she said, her frail voice firm. A woman who will love you not for your crown, but for your heart. Before I take my last breath, I will see your heart in gentle hands. Eros shook his head. Mother, this is madness. You cannot even walk through the garden without aid. How do you expect to? She raised a trembling hand, silencing him. Do not call it madness, my son. Call it faith. There was a quiet strength in her eyes, the kind that once commanded armies and silenced lords. I have lived as a queen all my life, she continued, but I wish to die as a mother who gave her son the chance to be happy. For that, I must go among the people, not as their ruler, but as one of them. Eros frowned deeply. You intend to disguise yourself? Catherine nodded slowly. As a beggar, I will live among the poor, watch how they treat one another, see kindness in its truest form. And when I find the one woman who shows mercy to a soul with nothing to offer, I will bring her to you. Absolutely not, his voice thundered, the alpha in him rising. Do you know the danger, the filth of those streets, the lawless traders, the thieves? I know, she interrupted softly, and I know my time is short. I have faced worse than dirt and thieves, Eros. What is one last journey, if it grants me peace before I close my eyes forever? Her words pierced him like blades. He turned away, gripping the edge of the window so tightly the wood groaned under his fingers. The image of losing her, the only person who had ever truly seen him, filled him with dread. He wanted to forbid her. He wanted to roar like a king and command her to stay. But she was not only his mother, she was his queen. Her will had always been stronger than his temper. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its edge. If you insist on this foolishness, I will not stop you. Catherine smiled faintly, relief softening her features. I knew my son would understand. But you will not live on the streets, he added quickly. I will arrange a small cottage at the edge of the market, with guards hidden nearby. You will blend in, but you will not be unprotected. She nodded. As long as they stay unseen. If people suspect I am anyone but an old woman, they will not reveal their true hearts. Eros sighed heavily, his wolf pacing beneath his skin with unease. You are more stubborn than the mountain. She laughed softly, a sound that seemed to lighten the air in the room. And you, my son, are more lonely than the moon. Let me change that. He turned to face her, eyes glinting with both frustration and love. If harm comes to you, then let it, she whispered. For I would rather die searching for your happiness than live another day watching you wither behind that crown. For a long time neither spoke. The silence between them was thick with the unspoken, the fear of loss, the weight of love, the ache of time running short. At last, Eros knelt before her bed. "If you must go, then go. But promise me this, mother. You will return." Catherine reached out and touched his face, her fingers tracing the hard lines time had carved into his features. "When I do, my son, it will be with the woman who will heal you." That night, while the castle slept, the Queen Mother shed her silk gown and jewels. A maid she trusted cut her silver hair unevenly, and she draped herself in a coarse brown cloak. A hood shadowed her face. Dust streaked her hands. By morning, the palace gates opened for an old beggar woman who limped her way toward the market square, carrying only a worn satchel and a prayer whispered to the moon goddess. "Guide me," she murmured, her voice trembling but determined. "Let me find the heart meant for my son." From the highest tower, Alpha King Eros watched her go, a hooded figure swallowed by the mist. His chest tightened painfully, but he did not call her back. The guards at the gate bowed as she passed, not knowing they bowed to their queen. And as the market stirred awake in the distance, none could guess that the fate of the kingdom had just stepped into its heart, disguised as a frail beggar with eyes that still gleamed like a crown. The market was alive long before sunrise, a place of endless noise, colors, and struggle. The air was thick with the scent of roasted nuts and sweat, the cries of traders calling for customers, and the rhythmic howling of wolves from distant forests. To the poor, it was survival. To the wealthy, a spectacle. But for one woman wrapped in a tattered brown cloak, it was a mission born of love. Queen Mother Catherine, now known only as Eloise, limped into the market square with a small wooden bowl in hand. Her once regal silver hair was cut and hidden beneath her hood, her soft hands now roughened by dirt. No one looked twice at her. That was the point. Her first days among her people were a brutal awakening. The market's kindness was selective. Pity was rare. Each morning she sat near the well, hoping for compassion. But what she found was cruelty, disguised as indifference. "Move, old woman," a vendor snapped, kicking her bowl aside as she swept her stall. Catherine's breath caught as the little coins she had gathered scattered into the dust. She bent to pick them up, but a pup darted forward, snatching one before running away laughing. "May the goddess forgive you," she whispered under her breath, more to herself than to anyone else. As the days passed, she became invisible. People tossed crumbs her way, but most ignored her. When she tried to speak, they turned away. She heard whispers that she must have been cursed, that she should go beg at the palace gates where the rich fools might pity her. Yet every night, as she lay in her small cottage on the outskirts, a place Eros had arranged quietly, Catherine prayed, "Moon goddess, show me a heart untainted by greed, a soul that shines even in darkness." Weeks slipped by. Her back ached, her strength waned, but her resolve burned bright. She had seen the hearts of nobles. Now she wanted to see the hearts of commoners. Then came the day the sun seemed to burn the world itself. The heat shimmered over the market like waves, turning even the air heavy. Vendors moved sluggishly, wiping sweat from their brows. Children sought shade beneath carts, and animals panted in the dirt. Catherine sat at her usual spot by the well, her head bowed, her lips dry and cracked. The world around her blurred. Her body was growing too weak. She hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. Her strength was failing faster than she had expected. A group of young women passed, laughing as they fanned themselves with palm leaves. One looked at her and smirked. "Why do you sit here, old woman? Go to the palace. Perhaps the Alpha King will throw you a bone." The others chuckled and they moved on. Catherine closed her eyes briefly, breathing shallowly. For a moment she thought she might faint. Then she heard a voice, soft, firm, and close. "Excuse me, are you all right?" Catherine blinked, raising her head. A young woman stood before her, a basket balanced on one arm, strands of dark hair sticking to her face with sweat. Her eyes, deep, brown, and steady, were filled not with pity, but genuine concern. "I'm fine," Catherine rasped, though she clearly wasn't. The girl frowned. "You're not. You look faint." She glanced around. "Wait here." Before Catherine could protest, the girl rushed to a nearby stall. Moments later, she returned with a small clay cup filled with water and a piece of bread wrapped in cloth. "Here, drink slowly," she said, kneeling beside her. Catherine's hands trembled as she accepted the cup. "You shouldn't waste your money on me, child." "It's not a waste," the girl said simply. "No one deserves to be treated like this." There was something in her tone, quiet but strong, that made Catherine study her closely. The girl's clothes were plain, her palms rough, her wrists marked with faint slave scars that looked like old burns. Yet there was grace in her movements, the kind that came not from breeding, but from discipline and pain. "What is your name?" Catherine asked softly. "Freya," the girl replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I work over there, the weaving stall by the corner." She pointed to a small wooden structure draped with colorful fabrics. "Come, it's too hot to sit here." Catherine hesitated. "I wouldn't want to trouble you." Freya smiled faintly. "You wouldn't. Please. It's the least I can do." So the old beggar rose, leaning on her arm as Freya guided her through the crowd. Some people stared, others whispered. "There goes the proud slave again," one man muttered under his breath. Freya ignored him, her jaw tightening. She helped Catherine sit on a stool beside her loom, then fetched a cup of cool water from a jar. "Rest here," she said. "The shade will help." Catherine looked around. The stall was simple but full of beauty. Rolls of fabric shimmered in the sunlight, dyed in shades of rose, indigo, and emerald. Freya's hands moved swiftly, weaving thread after thread, the pattern forming like magic before her eyes. "You made these?" Catherine asked, astonished. Freya nodded. "It's how I survive. Not many buy from me, though." "Why not? They're beautiful." Freya gave a small, bitter laugh. "Because beauty means nothing when it comes from a slave's hands." Catherine's breath caught. "A slave?" "Yes," Freya replied quietly. "But not anymore. He cast me out when I refused to be his toy. Now I am free, though the world still calls me what I was." There was no bitterness in her tone, only tired dignity. Catherine's heart clenched. She had met countless women in her life, queens, priestesses, noble daughters, but none who carried strength quite like this. As the day passed, Catherine watched Freya weave, speak kindly to customers who rarely bought, and share her meager food with two hungry children who lingered nearby. When one of the boys thanked her shyly, Freya smiled. "You owe me nothing. Just be kind to someone else one day." Catherine turned away, her throat tight. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to dip, Freya gathered her unsold fabrics. "You should rest now," she said to Catherine. "Where do you live? I'll walk you there." "Oh no," Catherine said quickly. "It's nearby. I'll manage." "Still, I insist," Freya replied gently. "It's dangerous for someone your age to walk alone after sunset." Catherine chuckled softly, a sound that felt foreign after so many silent weeks. "You are stubborn, Freya." "So I've been told." Freya smiled. They walked together through the narrow pathway until Catherine assured her she was close to home. "Thank you, my dear. You've done more for me today than many have in years." Freya shrugged modestly. "No one should suffer alone, not even strangers." Catherine hesitated, then extended her hand. "Then let us not be strangers. My name is Eloise." Freya's face lit up with a gentle smile. "Eloise," she repeated softly. "It suits you." The old woman watched as Freya walked away, her figure bathed in the fading light of dusk. Something stirred deep within her chest, a feeling she hadn't known in a long time. Hope. That night, as she lit a small candle inside her cottage, Catherine knelt and whispered her prayer again. Moon goddess, I have seen her. The one who gave without asking, who saw not a beggar, but a soul. Guide me that I may know her heart fully. The days that followed blurred into soft rhythms of quiet companionship. Every morning as the first light washed over the market, Freya would glance toward the narrow lane where the old woman, Eloise, usually sat with her thin shawl pulled over her shoulders. At first, Freya only waved. Then she began bringing her bread crusts and leftover stew. Soon after, she found herself sitting beside her, not out of pity, but because she somehow felt lighter there, as if the air around Eloise carried peace. "Do you live alone?" Freya asked one afternoon, her voice gentle as she handed over a small clay bowl of porridge. Eloise nodded slowly. I've been alone for many years now." The answer pierced Freya's chest like a blade of ice. Alone. It was a word she knew too well. The silence after her parents were gone, the way people stepped aside when she passed, whispering slave like a curse. "That must be hard," she murmured. "Living without anyone to talk to." Eloise smiled faintly, her wrinkles deepening. "The moon keeps me company, and kind souls like you remind me I'm not invisible." Freya laughed softly, brushing her fingers against the table's edge. "Invisible suits me better than hated." That caught the old woman's attention. "Who could hate you?" Freya hesitated, then sighed. "You'd be surprised. My parents were slaves. Good people. My father was a blacksmith. My mother wove baskets. They worked under Lord Titus, until one night a noble accused them of stealing silver cups." Her hands stilled on the loom. "They weren't thieves," she whispered. "But slaves don't have the right to defend themselves. They were beaten, tied to stakes, and left under the moon. I still remember the smell of their blood, and the silence afterward. I was 17. Eloise's hands curled into fists under her shawl. The wolf within her howled with fury. She reached for Freya's trembling hand. "No one should carry that memory alone," she said quietly. "Your parents must have been brave to raise a daughter like you." Freya blinked, tears catching the dying light. "People call me proud, but I'm just trying to survive." "I know." Eloise's voice carried weight, not pity but understanding. "Pride is not a sin when it's all that's left of your dignity." Behind those weary eyes, Queen Mother Catherine saw the same fire she once had in her youth, the courage to stay soft in a cruel world. Her wolf stirred inside her, sensing something ancient and luminous surrounding the girl. That evening, as the marketplace grew quiet and shadows stretched long, Eloise rose slowly. Freya offered to walk her home, but the woman only smiled. "The moonlight knows my path. Rest, my dear." Freya watched her disappear into the dusk, never imagining that beneath the frail disguise walked the Queen Mother herself. Night fell over the palace like a velvet curtain. The guards bowed low as a white wolf streaked through the gates, her fur glowing under the silver moon. The air shimmered, and Catherine shifted back into her human form, clutching her robe tightly as she climbed the marble stairs. At the top balcony stood Eros, tall, broad-shouldered, and carved from moonlight and iron. His silver eyes glinted against the darkness, his presence cold but commanding. He turned when he sensed her. "Mother?" Catherine smiled, though she could hardly hide her exhaustion. "Were you waiting for me?" "I heard the gates open," he replied curtly, studying her face. She stepped closer, her voice low but steady. "I met a girl today, a slave with a heart far too kind for this cruel world." Eros arched a brow. "A slave?" "Yes," Catherine said, her gaze steady. "But there's something different about her. She cared for me, not knowing who I was. She gave me food she could barely afford to share. And when I looked in her eyes, I saw something rare. Purity, untouched by greed." Eros turned away, resting his hands on the cold stone railing. "You see goodness everywhere, Mother." Catherine's lips curved in a knowing smile. "Perhaps, but Tell me, Eros, when was the last time you saw someone with no greed or desire, just fighting for her dignity? He said nothing. The night breeze stirred his hair, carrying the faint scent of pine and lavender, though he couldn't explain where it came from. Deep within, his wolf growled softly, restless. Catherine saw the flicker in his eyes and knew he felt it too, even if he wouldn't admit it. She touched his arm gently. You may not believe in signs, my son, but the moon is guiding something toward you. Eros remained still, staring out into the distance. His mother's words lingered long after she retired, echoing in his mind like a song he couldn't forget. The moon hung low that morning, its pale glow fading into dawn, but Alpha King Eros could not rest. His wolf paced within him, restless, agitated, clawing against the inside of his mind like it was demanding something he didn't yet understand. His mother's words from the night before echoed still. A girl, pure of heart, untainted by greed. He had dismissed it at first, but the more he tried to ignore it, the more his instincts rebelled. Something deep, primal, and undeniably wolf-stirred at the mention of the slave girl. By mid-morning, he made his decision. If the moon goddess had truly marked a moment, he would see it for himself, not as a king, but as a man among his people. He stripped off the royal crest, exchanged his embroidered cloak for a rough brown hooded mantle, and let his golden insignia ring rest in the drawer beside his throne. His guards were forbidden to follow. The moment he stepped through the palace gates, the city swallowed him, loud, raw, and alive in ways the marble halls never were. The market was buzzing with life. Wolves in human form bartered for herbs and meat. Omegas scurried past with baskets, heads bowed low, while nobles strutted with arrogance. The air smelled of sweat, roasted nuts, and wolf musk, the scent of a kingdom alive, but fractured. Then he saw her. Freya sat behind a small wooden table, her hands moving with rhythmic grace as she wove bright threads together. She didn't see him at first. No one did. People walked past her stall without a glance, whispering the word slave like venom. Yet there was no defeat in her posture. Her back was straight, her chin lifted. And when his eyes fell on her wrist, the faint sunlight caught the edge of her brand, a mark burned into her skin, cruel and permanent. Yet it glowed, like a badge of silent rebellion. For the first time in years, Eros's heart clenched. His wolf stirred. He approached slowly. How much for that piece? He asked, pointing to a sky-blue fabric that shimmered under the light. Freya looked up. Her eyes were gentle but wary, the kind that had learned not to trust easily. 2 silvers, my lord, she said, her tone careful, humble, but not servile. He frowned slightly. Only 2? It's fine work. She hesitated, fingers brushing the edge of the cloth. No one will buy from a slave if my price matches that of a freeborn. The words hit him like a blow. So quiet, so simple. And yet in them lay the reflection of everything broken in his kingdom. Laws that had crushed the innocent. Names that chained people to a fate they never chose. His wolf growled low, not in anger at her, but at the truth she carried. He stepped closer. That seems unfair, he murmured. She gave a faint smile. Fairness is for those born with names that matter. For a moment their eyes met, and something shifted. He didn't see a slave anymore. He saw a woman, proud, strong, scarred but radiant. A flicker of warmth rose inside him, strange and unfamiliar. Without another word, Eros reached into his pouch and dropped 10 gleaming silver coins onto the table. Freya froze. My lord, that's far too much. Consider it an act of balance, he said quietly. Use it to feed those who cannot feed themselves. Or buy back your freedom if such a thing can be bought. She stared at him, searching his hooded face for deceit, but found none. You carry the scent of a noble, she said slowly. And yet I've never met a kind noble before. What's your name, my lord? Her words amused him. He'd met warriors who trembled before his gaze, but this woman, branded a slave, spoke to him as if they were equals. He tilted his head slightly, a smile ghosting his lips. Then perhaps it's time you met one. My name is Lord Tiberius. And what shall I call you, my lady? Freya gave a soft laugh, light, airy, and unexpectedly warm. You flatter me, my lord. I am no lady, but my name is Freya. The sound of her laughter did something to him. It slipped past his defenses, soothing the part of him that had forgotten gentleness. Well, Freya, he said, savoring her name, I'd say you've more grace than half the women who call themselves ladies. Her cheeks flushed slightly, but her tone remained teasing. Careful, my lord. Words like that might make people think you're not as proud as the other nobles. Freya studied him for a long moment, her gaze quiet but unyielding. Tell me something, my lord, she said softly. Why would a noble care if a slave underprices her work? Eros hesitated. Maybe because he's tired of a world that measures worth by birth. Her breath caught. The sincerity in his tone disarmed her. For a heartbeat, she forgot he was a stranger. Then I hope more nobles learn to grow tired too, she murmured. Eros's lips curved. If they had your heart, perhaps they would. And in that moment something shifted, subtle, yet undeniable. Admiration, curiosity, a spark neither could name but both could feel. When Eros finally turned to leave, his steps felt heavier. Her scent, a mix of lavender, smoke, and something wild, clung to him like an invisible thread. His wolf pressed closer beneath his skin, restless. Back at the palace, as he stood on the balcony, he found himself staring into the distance, toward the market he'd just left. The wind carried the faintest trace of her scent, and his heart quickened. Freya, he whispered under his breath. The name tasted like sunlight and rebellion. He didn't know it yet, but that single meeting had begun to unravel the cold armor he had built around his soul, the armor that even a king's power could not protect. For the first time in his reign, the Alpha King wanted to return to the world as a man, not to rule it, but to understand the woman who had reminded him how to feel. In the far distance, beneath the same moon, Freya sat by her candle, staring at the 10 coins she could barely believe were hers. The stranger's voice echoed in her mind, calm, deep, and strange. You've more grace than half the women who call themselves ladies. She smiled faintly, unaware that the man she'd just met was the king whose name had ruled her fate since the day she was branded. Sleep refused to come. The moon hung high and cold above the palace, its light spilling across the marble floor like spilled milk. Yet Eros sat awake, elbows resting on his knees, hands buried in his hair. Every time he closed his eyes, her voice echoed, calm, soft, and painfully sincere. No one will buy from a slave if my price matches that of a freeborn. It wasn't just the words that haunted him. It was the way she said them, not in bitterness but with quiet acceptance. A kind of strength he'd never seen even among his fiercest warriors. Freya had spoken like someone who had made peace with pain, not because she wanted to, but because the world had given her no other choice. He rose and walked to the balcony, the night breeze brushing against his bare chest. Below, the kingdom slept. The torches along the streets burned low, and the scent of the forests beyond the walls carried with it the faint whisper of wolves. His wolves, his people. All of them should have been safe. Yet how many Freyas existed in his kingdom? He remembered the market, the dust, the chatter, the curious eyes of the poor, and in the middle of it all, Freya. Her hands moving gracefully as she weaved fabrics, her posture proud despite the brand that burned on her wrist, that mark, the cursed emblem of servitude. He clenched his fists. How did I not see this sooner? He whispered to the wind. All his life he had been told that the slave laws kept the kingdom stable, that the hierarchy of power was divine order. that omegas were born to serve and slaves were beyond redemption. But now he saw the lie. He saw the fear, the cruelty, the broken spirits behind that order. He could still smell Freya's scent, faint, earthy, touched by lavender. It clung to his thoughts like a forbidden spell. It wasn't just her beauty that haunted him. It was her fire, the way her gaze dared him to look beyond his title and into the man he had long buried beneath duty. That night, he didn't rest. He paced his chamber, the beast in him stirring restlessly. His wolf form itched to break free, to run through the forest, to hunt the guilt that clawed at him. But something deeper kept him chained. A purpose. The next morning, the throne room blazed with sunlight. Gold drapes shimmered as the royal council gathered, their whispers sharp as blades. Lord Titus stood at the front, his smirk as proud as ever, the same man who once owned Freya like a trinket. Eros entered in silence. His presence silenced the room instantly. The Alpha King did not need to raise his voice to command obedience. His aura alone carried the weight of storms. "Bring me the records," he said coldly. A scribe hurried forward, trembling as he handed over a thick scroll of parchment, the registry of the enslaved. Eros unrolled it, scanning names that stretched endlessly. His jaw tightened. Each name was a life stolen. He rose to his full height. "Effective today," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "No one in this kingdom shall be bought or sold again." A heavy silence followed, then chaos. "My king, you cannot," Lord Titus shouted. "The slave trade sustains our markets." Another noble, Lady Valera, gasped. "Without servants, who will tend our estates? Our children?" Eros's gaze hardened. "Then perhaps you will learn the virtue of work, Lady Valera." Murmurs rippled across the chamber. Titus sneered. "You would defy the law of our ancestors? You risk rebellion." "Then let rebellion come," Eros growled, eyes flashing gold. "If the law of our ancestors demands cruelty, then I will rewrite it in my own blood." The temperature in the room dropped. The nobles fell silent. Eros stepped forward, his presence radiating dominance. "From this day, every slave shall be freed, every brand shall be erased. No wolf under my rule shall be called property." No one moved. By midday, the proclamation swept through the kingdom like fire through dry grass. Bells rang, horns blared, the market erupted in disbelief and joy. Slaves dropped their tools, some falling to their knees, weeping. Others shouted prayers to the moon goddess. For the first time, they were not called property. And among them, standing before her little fabric stall, was Freya. The news reached her through whispers, then through cheers. She froze, her heart pounding. "The king has ended slavery," someone cried. "No one shall bear the brand again." Freya's hands trembled. The world around her blurred. For a moment, she could barely breathe. Then she heard another merchant mutter. "They say it was the king himself who ordered it, after meeting a kind noble." Her breath hitched. Could it be Lord Tiberius? She clutched her chest, a soft smile curving her lips as warmth spread through her veins. Gratitude, and something far gentler. "Maybe," she whispered to herself, "kind nobles do exist." As the crowd cheered and the bells rang on, Freya lifted her face to the sky. The moon still lingered faintly above the sun, a silver ghost watching from afar. Somewhere in the palace, Eros stood by his balcony once again, looking toward the market, unaware that the girl who had changed his heart was, at that very moment, thinking of him too. And though neither knew it yet, their fates had already begun to intertwine. Bound not by law or rank, but by the restless pull of two souls that had finally found a reflection of themselves in another. The market thrummed with life again, laughter, music, and the sound of coins clinking into eager palms. But Freya wasn't listening to any of it. Her gaze kept darting toward the crowd, searching, hoping. 2 days had passed since the king's decree, and though the whole kingdom sang of freedom, her thoughts wandered only toward one person, the mysterious noble who had bought her fabrics and left her heart unsteady. When a hooded figure appeared at the edge of her stall, her pulse jumped before her mind could form his name. That same quiet grace, that same scent, clean, wild, and strangely familiar. He stopped in front of her, his cloak trailing dust as he smiled beneath the hood. "Do you always stare at customers like that, or am I just special?" Freya gasped softly. "Lord Tiberius," she whispered, her lips curving into a smile she didn't try to hide. "You have been busy." He chuckled. "Forgive me, my lady. Affairs of state delayed me." She raised a brow, pretending to study his hidden face. "Affairs of state? Or of conscience?" His laughter came low, rich, and disarming. "Ah, so you heard the news?" Freya leaned closer across the table, her eyes glinting. "Don't tell me it's a coincidence that days after meeting you, the king suddenly ended slavery." He tilted his head, pretending to think. Perhaps the king has finally learned to listen to reason. She crossed her arms playfully. Or perhaps a kind noble whispered reason into his ear. Eros smiled beneath his hood, but his chest ached with the weight of the secret he couldn't yet reveal. "Maybe I put in a word or two to the right people," he said lightly. Her laughter rang through the air like music, and something inside him warmed at the sound. He hadn't realized how long it had been since laughter didn't feel forced. When her laughter faded, she studied him, really studied him, her gaze searching for something more than the hood allowed. She asked quietly, "Why hide behind shadows, my lord? Are you afraid someone will see who you are?" Eros's smile softened. "I prefer to be seen for who I am, not what I wear," he answered, his tone threaded with truth. Freya's eyes lowered, her voice a whisper now. "Or perhaps," she said, "you fear being seen with someone like me." That struck deeper than she intended. Eros froze. He stepped closer, so close that the space between them shrank until he could see the reflection of his own turmoil in her eyes. "Never," he said firmly. She looked up, startled. He reached out, his hand covering hers. "Never call yourself that again. You are not a slave, Freya. You are more than what they named you." The touch was supposed to be brief, a reassurance, a gesture of respect. But the instant his skin brushed hers, something wild snapped awake inside them both. A pulse, a heat, a pull neither could explain. Freya's breath caught as warmth spread up her arm, racing toward her heart. Her wolf, the part of her she had long buried under years of humiliation, stirred restlessly within. For the first time, she felt it respond to someone. Eros stiffened. Beneath the mask of control, his own wolf growling softly in recognition. The bond, faint but unmistakable, shimmered like invisible fire between them. He had met countless women, nobles, warriors, daughters of high-born alphas, yet none had stirred his wolf. None, until now, until her. Freya rubbed her wrist where he had touched her. It still tingled as though the warmth refused to fade. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the market disappeared. The noise, the people, the world, all faded into the soft rhythm of their breathing. But the spell broke when a child ran past, chasing a chicken, laughter scattering the air. Freya blinked and looked away, her cheeks flushed. She picked up a folded cloth and held it out to him. "For you," she said. He frowned slightly. "You don't have to." "This isn't for you to pay for," she said, smiling faintly. "Consider it gratitude for being a noble with a conscience." Eros accepted the fabric carefully, fingers brushing hers again, and the spark returned, fierce and undeniable. He could feel his wolf pacing just beneath his skin. He hid it behind a polite bow. "Then I shall cherish it, my lady." "Freya," she corrected softly. He smiled. "Freya?" The name rolled off his tongue like a prayer. As he turned to leave, she watched him go, her heart strangely heavy. "Lord Tiberius," she called after him. He paused. Will I see you again? Eros hesitated, torn between duty and desire. Then he turned his head slightly, his smile hidden by the hood. If the moon wills it, he said. Freya's heart fluttered, though she didn't understand why. She watched him disappear into the crowd, unaware that every step he took away from her only deepened the invisible bond drawing them together. The moon hung low that night, a perfect silver arc carved against the velvet sky. Its glow spilled over the quiet riverbank where the tall reeds swayed, whispering secrets only wolves could hear. Freya sat by the water's edge, her legs tucked beneath her hair unbound and catching the moonlight like spun gold. The reflection of the night sky danced in her eyes as she waited, though she would never admit it aloud. She had told herself she wouldn't come again. She had sworn the last meeting would be the final one. Yet here she was, heart restless, drawn by something she couldn't name. A soft sound behind her, a shift of footsteps on grass, made her turn, and there he was. Cloaked, hood drawn, but the night wind betrayed him, carrying his scent across the air. That scent. It was warmth and pine, and wild. It made her pulse stumble. "You came," she said quietly. Eros stepped closer, his face hidden in the dim light. "You doubted I would?" "I hoped you wouldn't," she whispered, a tremor in her voice. He smiled, sitting beside her. "Then it's fortunate I'm terrible at doing what's best for me." They both laughed softly, though neither could explain why it felt like a confession. The night was peaceful, too peaceful, the kind that strips away defenses. They talked for hours, as they always did now, about the smallest things, the color of moonlit rivers, the sound of wind through the fields, the strange beauty and loneliness. And sometimes when silence stretched between them, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged. It was alive. Eros watched her, his hood lowered just enough to reveal his jawline, his lips, and the glint of his eyes that caught the moonlight. He didn't speak for a long while, only listened, to her laughter, her heart, her breathing, each sound feeding the storm inside him. His wolf stirred restlessly within him. Eros shut his eyes briefly, forcing control. He had trained all his life to be stronger than instinct, to rule with reason. But around her, his wolf refused to obey. Every word she spoke made his chest ache with need, not of the body, but of something deeper. "You're quiet tonight," Freya said softly, studying him. "Have I said something wrong?" He shook his head. "No, it's not that. I'm just listening." "To what?" He looked at her then, really looked. "To you." Her breath hitched. "And what do you hear?" He hesitated. The truth hovered on his lips. "I hear my mate." But he couldn't say it. He couldn't break the fragile rhythm between them with words that could destroy her peace. Instead, he said gently, "I hear a woman who is strong enough to defile even the nobles and still stand." Freya blinked, caught off guard. Her lips parted, but no sound came. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then she laughed softly, trying to ease the weight of the moment. "You say strange things, my lord." "I've been told that," he murmured, eyes never leaving hers. The river glimmered beside them, mirroring the moon's silver face. Freya's hand brushed against his accidentally, and the air shifted, thickened. Her pulse raced as her skin burned from the brief contact. "Your hand is trembling," he said quietly. "Because I'm cold," she lied. Without thinking, he reached out, his hand covering hers, warm, steady. And in that instant, the world stilled. Their wolves, hidden beneath human flesh, stirred with recognition, their heartbeats sinking like echoes of the same rhythm. Freya's gaze lifted to his face. For the first time, she saw the shadow of the man beneath the hood, not just a noble, but powerful, and heartbreakingly lonely. "Who are you, really?" she whispered. He swallowed. "Someone you shouldn't trust." "But I do," she said simply. Eros felt the ground shift under him. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of truth, a truth he wasn't ready to accept. He leaned closer, drawn by something stronger than reason. Freya's heart pounded as his face neared hers, close enough that she could feel his breath mingling with hers. The world shrank to the space between their lips, trembling, waiting. But just before they touched, Eros stopped. His chest heaved. His hand slipped from hers. Freya. He whispered her name like it was sacred, forbidden. She froze, her body still leaning toward him. Why did you stop? He drew back, struggling to steady his voice. Because if I don't, I won't be able to. Her brow furrowed. Won't be able to what? Walk away, he said softly. The ache in his words pierced her more than any rejection could. Freya turned her face away, staring at the river's shimmering surface. She didn't cry, but her heart clenched painfully. Eros stood, his shadow long under the moonlight. He wanted to stay, to tell her everything. That she was his mate, that his wolf had chosen her, that his soul no longer listened to reason. But fear chained him. Not fear of her rejection, fear of the world that would destroy her for belonging to him. I should go, he said finally. She nodded, not trusting her voice. And with that, he disappeared into the night, leaving Freya staring after him. Her heart tangled in 1,000 questions, her wolf howling softly beneath her skin. Above them, the moon shimmered brighter, as if bearing witness to a bond that neither of them could deny anymore. The forest stood still that night, as though it sensed what was about to unfold. A full moon hung above, pouring its pale silver light over the clearing where 2 figures stood, one cloaked in truth, the other trembling on the edge of revelation. Freya had followed Lord Tiberius, deeper into the woods, her heart light, her laughter easy. She didn't know why he had asked her to come, only that she couldn't refuse. They stopped beneath the great moon oak, its roots sprawling like veins across the earth. The wind sighed through the leaves, carrying the faint howl of distant wolves, a song of power and longing that made Freya's skin prickle. Eros turned toward her, silent for a long moment. His cloak rippled in the wind, his hand tightening around the edge of his hood. Freya, he said softly, do you trust me? She smiled faintly, tilting her head. I've trusted you more than I've trusted anyone in a long time. He nodded, exhaling as though the weight of a kingdom pressed against his chest. Then forgive me for hiding this long. Before she could ask what he meant, he pulled the hood back. The moonlight fell across his face, sharp, regal, achingly familiar. His golden hair shimmered like gold. His eyes glowed faintly gold. Eyes she had seen before, painted on banners, carved into palace walls. Her breath caught in her throat. The Alpha King, she whispered, stumbling back as the truth crashed through her like a wave. No, this isn't possible. Eros stepped forward, his expression raw, unguarded. Now you see why I hid. The world looks at me and sees only a crown, never the man beneath it. Freya shook her head, her voice breaking. You lied to me. You let me speak to you like an equal. I wanted you to, he cut in gently. I needed to know what it felt like to be seen, truly seen. You gave me that. Her hands trembled. This is madness. You're the king. I am nothing. Don't you dare say that, he snapped, his voice echoing through the trees. His eyes flashed gold, his wolf clawing at the surface. You are not nothing. You are the only thing that feels real to me. Freya stumbled back again, her heart hammering. Every instinct screamed for her to run, yet her soul, her wolf, ached to stay. My king, please, she whispered. If anyone sees us together, then let them see, he said fiercely, taking a step closer. Let them talk, let them rage. You've seen me as no one ever has. Don't leave me now. Tears filled her eyes. I can't be your mate. I'll only bring you ruin. Eros's expression softened, his anger melting into something deeper, pain, desperation, love. Then let ruin come. I would face the world for you. The moonlight bathed them both, their wolves stirring beneath their skin, recognizing each other even as their human hearts hesitated. Freya's lips parted, trembling between fear and longing. He reached out, brushing her cheek with trembling fingers. You think I chose this life? The crown was forced upon me. But you... His voice broke. You are the first thing I have ever chosen. Her tears slipped free. And that's why I must go. Before he could stop her, she turned and ran, her feet pounding the forest floor, her heartbeat echoing louder than the howling wind. The trees swallowed her figure. Eros didn't chase her. He stood frozen in the clearing, staring after her as his wolf howled inside him, a sound torn between agony and longing. But somewhere in the distance, Freya fell to her knees, pressing a trembling hand over her chest as her wolf cried silently within her. Because no matter how far she ran, his scent clung to her, the scent of the man she could not love and yet could never stop loving. The royal chamber was dim, lit only by the fire crackling in the hearth. Shadows danced on the walls as Eros stood near the window, his shoulders rigid, his crown abandoned on the table. His reflection stared back from the glass, feared and obeyed by all, yet powerless before one woman's trembling voice. When the door creaked open, the scent of lavender and wisdom filled the room. Queen Mother Catherine stepped in, draped in her silver robe, though her body was still weak from sickness. Her eyes, calm yet sharp, took in her son's unrest. You've been awake all night, she said softly. Tell me, my son, what burdens you? Eros's jaw clenched. He turned slowly, his voice breaking the silence. It's Freya. Catherine said nothing, only waited, patient as the moon. I told her the truth, he continued, pacing restlessly. I showed her who I am, and she ran. She looked at me like I was her nightmare come alive. He stopped, running a hand through his hair. But I love her, Mother. I can't stop thinking about her. Every breath feels like I'm chasing her ghost. Catherine's gaze softened. She is not rejecting your love, my son, she said after a long pause. She is protecting your crown. Eros blinked, confused. Protecting it? From what? From ruin, she replied simply. The people have only just begun to accept your decree that ended slavery. To love a former slave so openly would ignite the fury of nobles and stir the whispers of rebellion. Freya knows that, and she carries that fear for you. Eros lowered his head, his voice rough. Then what am I to do? Command her to love me? Cage her like the world once caged her? Catherine stepped closer and touched his arm. No, Eros. Love that is commanded is not love. It's another form of bondage. Give her time. Give her space to see that your heart is not another cage. Her words sank deep. The fire popped quietly, and for a moment, the mighty king was only a man who had never truly learned to wait. Catherine smiled faintly. You have fought battles with armies, my son. Now you must fight one with patience. He nodded slowly, her wisdom anchoring him. And if she never returns? The Queen Mother looked toward the night sky beyond the window. If she is your true mate, the moon will not let her stay away. Bonds written by fate cannot be erased by fear. Her voice was steady, filled with the quiet certainty of one who had seen destiny play its cruel, beautiful games. Far from the palace, in the stillness of her small cottage, Freya sat by the dying embers of her hearth. Sleep had abandoned her long ago. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, his steady gaze, the warmth of his hand, the pain in his voice when she ran. Her wolf stirred restlessly within her, whispering his name through the threads of her soul. She pressed her palm to her heart, trying to steady its wild rhythm. He's the Alpha King, she whispered to herself, as if repeating it would make the feelings vanish. But it didn't. If anything, it made them burn hotter. Because behind that crown she had seen the man, the one who listened, who laughed, who treated her as if she were something sacred. Her eyes filled as she remembered the years of being called worthless. Every whip, every cruel word, every night spent wondering why she had been born to suffer. She had survived it all, but love, real love, terrified her more than chains ever did, because now she had something to lose. The moonlight spilled across her face as she rose from her bed and walked to the mirror hanging on the wall. Her reflection looked back, the same eyes, but not the same woman. There was steel now, glimmering behind the softness. "I will not run any more," she whispered. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. "If love is my test, then I will face it." The wolf within her gave a low, answering howl, not of sorrow this time, but of awakening. Freya stepped to the doorway, watching the horizon blush with dawn. She could feel something shifting, like fate itself was holding its breath. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a slave or a victim. She felt like a warrior, of her own heart, her own choice, her own freedom. The moon hung low, casting threads of silver through the forest canopy. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the hum of crickets and the distant howl of a lone wolf. In the clearing, Freya stood waiting, heart pounding, breath unsteady. She felt him before she saw him. That familiar pull. Then, from the shadows he appeared, cloaked once again as Lord Tiberius, but no disguise could hide the power in his stride or the quiet storm in his eyes. "Freya," he said softly, his voice echoing through the night like a prayer spoken only for her. She turned toward him, the moonlight catching the hint of tears in her eyes. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. He stepped closer. "And yet I couldn't stay away." For a moment silence stretched between them, thick, alive, unspoken. Freya looked down at her trembling hands. "You scare me, Eros," she confessed, her voice fragile. "Not because of who you are, but because of what I feel when I'm near you." He frowned gently. "And what do you feel?" Her gaze lifted to his, steady this time. "That if I let myself love you, there will be no turning back." She took a shaky breath. "All my life, I've fought for my dignity. I refuse to let anyone own me, not my chains, not my past. But now," her voice cracked, "now I want to fight for something else, for my heart." Eros's throat tightened, the words he had longed to hear, the truth he never thought she'd speak. They hit him like a storm. He took another step closer, his voice low but firm. "You don't have to fight alone, Freya. Let me fight beside you." The forest seemed to hush. Even the night waited for her answer. Freya's eyes shimmered with emotion, torn between fear and faith. Slowly she reached for his hand. Her fingers brushed his, warm and trembling. "Then I will be your mate," she said, barely above a whisper. But the power in her words shook the very air. The moment their hands joined, a rush of heat spread through Freya's veins. Her wolf awakened with a cry of recognition. Her pupils glowed faint silver, and her breath hitched as she felt his spirit intertwine with hers. Eros's wolf answered, rising within him, his eyes flashing gold under the moonlight. Their energies collided, not violently but beautifully, like two rivers meeting after a lifetime apart. Eros cupped her face gently. "Do you feel it?" he asked, voice shaking. She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. "It feels like the world finally stopped running from me." He smiled faintly. "No, Freya. It's the world finally catching up to you." Then, under the watchful gaze of the moon, he leaned closer, slow, deliberate, reverent. Their foreheads touched first, breath mingling, hearts sinking. And when their lips met, it wasn't desperation. It was destiny. The kiss deepened. Her hands gripped his cloak, pulling him closer, and he responded with a tenderness that melted the last walls between them. Their wolves howled within, recognizing what their hearts had already known, that they were two halves of the same soul, bound not by fate's cruelty, but by its mercy. When they finally parted, Freya rested her head against his chest. His heart thundered beneath her ear. "Eros," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Whatever comes next, I won't run again." He brushed a kiss against her forehead. "Then together, we'll face whatever dawn brings." The moon glowed brighter, bathing them in its silver light, witness to the vow sealed not by blood, but by love freely chosen. The royal palace shimmered under the rising sun, its golden spires piercing the morning mist. The corridors buzzed with whispers. The Alpha King had brought a woman into the castle. None knew who she was, but rumors spread faster than wildfire. Some said she was a noble from the north. Others swore she was an Omega who had captured the king's heart with her beauty. None imagined the truth, that she was the slave girl once scorned in the market. Freya stood before the great marble doors of the royal court, trembling despite the finery draped over her. Silken fabrics, soft as clouds, flowed from her shoulders, and gold threads shimmered across her gown. Servants had bathed her in scented oils, brushed her hair until it glowed like spun chestnut and adorned her with jewels. Yet she felt like a stranger wearing another woman's life. Freya walked slowly behind a young servant girl who held a lantern to light the way. When the servant stopped before a tall wooden door, she turned and bowed. "Her Majesty awaits you, my lady." Then she slipped away, leaving Freya alone in the quiet hallway. The doors creaked open. Freya hesitated. Her palms were damp, her heart racing. Slowly, she stepped into the chamber. Her breath caught as her eyes found the woman standing by the window, regal, radiant, smiling. Queen Mother Catherine. But not the frail beggar she had once known. The woman before her glowed with authority, dressed in flowing white trimmed with sapphire silk, her silver crown gleaming under the morning light. Her aura was strong, the unmistakable energy of an alpha's mother, wise and commanding. Yet when her gaze fell upon Freya, all that power melted into warmth. Freya's heart stopped. "Eloise?" she whispered, disbelief flooding her. The Queen Mother walked towards her, her steps slow but sure. "You recognize me?" she said softly, eyes glistening with tears. "Yes, my dear child. I was the beggar by your stall. I was Eloise." Freya gasped, her knees nearly giving way. You were the queen." Her voice broke in awe and confusion. "Why? Why would you?" Catherine reached her, taking both of Freya's trembling hands into hers. "Because I needed to see a heart that could love without reason. I needed to know that compassion still existed in a world of greed and power." Her smile wavered. "And when the world turned its back on me, you offered kindness, not knowing who I was, not expecting anything in return." Tears spilled freely down Freya's cheeks. "I only did what anyone should have done." "No," Catherine said firmly, her voice thick with emotion. "You did what few would dare. You saw a person when others saw a burden. You gave dignity when none offered it to you." Freya tried to speak, but her throat tightened. Catherine drew her close, wrapping her arms around her as if embracing a long-lost daughter. "You loved me when you thought I was nothing," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Now let me love you as my daughter." Freya clung to Catherine, sobbing quietly into her shoulder. For years her heart had carried the scars of rejection, of pain, of loneliness. Now, for the first time, she felt something she had never known. Belonging. Catherine pulled back slightly, cupping Freya's face. "You are more than what the world named you. You are strength, grace, and courage. You may not have been born with a crown, but the moon goddess herself has placed one in your heart." Freya dropped to her knees, overwhelmed. "I am not worthy." Catherine smiled through her tears. "My dear, worthiness isn't something the world grants. It's something you've earned 100 times over." Freya straightened slowly, her heart steady, her spirit unbound. She had no crown, no title, but for the first time in her life, she felt like a queen. The royal court shimmered beneath the chandeliers, gold and crimson banners draping the marble walls. Nobles filled the room, men and women in jeweled robes, their perfumes heavy in the air, their whispers sharp as blades. The throne of the Alpha King stood high above them, carved from dark stone and wolf insignias, a symbol of dominance and power. At the foot of that throne stood Freya. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her silk gown, her heart racing as she felt every gaze pierce her like arrows. She had faced cruelty before him, humiliation, starvation, and chains. But this was different. This was judgment wrapped in finery, hatred masked behind polite smiles. Eros rose from his throne. His presence alone silenced the murmurs. His crown gleamed against the gold of his hair, his eyes steady on the woman beside him. "Before you all," he said, voice calm but carrying a dangerous undertone, "stands the woman I have chosen as my Luna." For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then came the storm. Gasps, murmurs, outrage. "She was a slave," someone hissed. "The Alpha King cannot bond with filth," another voice spat. "What of our lineage, our pride?" The noise grew until it became a tide of anger crashing through the hall. Freya stood frozen, her chest tightening. Her wolf whimpered deep inside her, not from fear, but from the old wound of shame being torn open again. And then a familiar voice rose above the chaos. Lord Titus. He stepped forward, his jeweled cloak sweeping the marble, his expression twisting into something venomous. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing mockingly, "this woman you bring before us, I know her. She once served beneath my roof. A slave bought with silver and fed with scraps. She is not fit to rule beside you." Gasps rippled through the room again. Eros's eyes darkened, the gold in them flashing like lightning. "You dare speak so in my court?" Titus straightened, arrogance gleaming. "I speak only truth. You are the Alpha King. You belong to nobility, to pure bloodlines, not to a branded girl who doesn't know her place." Freya flinched. The hall was spinning, every whisper clawing at her. Slave. Branded. Filth. Her fingers dug into her gown, her lungs burned, but she did not bow. Not this time. Eros stepped down from the throne. His boots echoed across the marble, each sound like the strike of a drum before battle. "You call her a slave," he said quietly, though his voice carried through the hall. "But I freed this kingdom from slavery months ago. Did you think those chains would remain in secret?" Titus's jaw tightened. "A decree cannot change blood. Some were born to serve my king. Some—" "Enough," Eros growled. The sound was not entirely human. Gasps fluttered again. A few nobles stumbled back as a faint shimmer of shadow rippled over the king's body. His wolf stirred beneath his skin, restless and furious. But Titus smirked, mistaking warning for weakness. "You've let your heart cloud your judgment, Eros. Your father would never—" The rest of his words were drowned by a sound that silenced the entire court, a deep, rumbling growl that shook the air itself. Eros's body trembled, his claws extending, eyes burning with black flame. "Do not speak of my father," he snarled, "and do not speak another word against my mate." Titus hesitated, but arrogance was a poison too deep to cure. "Then you are no king," he spat. "You only bring shame to the crown." That was the last breath Lord Titus ever drew. The transformation was swift and merciless. Darkness rippled from Eros like smoke, his form expanding, bones reshaping, muscle swelling. His cloak shredded into the air as a massive black wolf stood where the king had been, eyes glowing red gold, teeth gleaming like molten steel. The court fell to its knees in terror. Freya gasped, her wolf stirring violently, wanting to run, to protect, to scream. Eros lunged. The impact was thunderous. Titus tried to run, but the beast was faster, claws tearing through silk and flesh. The scream was brief, cut off by the sound of bones snapping. Blood splattered across the marble. across the golden pillars, across the faces of trembling nobles. When it was over, silence reigned. The only sound was the low snarl rumbling from the Alpha King's chest as his wolf stood over the ruined body. Eros lifted his head and howled, a sound that shook the castle walls. It was not a sound of rage alone, it was warning. A vow, a declaration that echoed through every corner of the hall. When the echo faded, the wolf's form shuddered, bones cracking as Eros returned to himself, his chest bare, his skin streaked with blood and sweat. His gaze swept over the cowering nobles. The herald rushed forward, his hands trembling with fear as he handed him a robe. "There are no slaves in this kingdom," he said again, his voice low but lethal. "Not while I draw breath." No one dared answer. Not a whisper, not a movement. Even the guards stood pale and still. Freya's knees nearly gave out as she watched him. This man who had killed not out of rage alone but from the primal need to protect her. Her heart ached with horror and awe. Eros turned toward her, his steps heavy. "You see now?" he said softly, his eyes still shadowed with the beast's glow. "Why they must never disrespect you again." Freya's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to tell him she didn't fear him, but her voice broke. Instead, she placed a trembling hand against his chest, over his heart still pounding like thunder. "You didn't have to prove it this way," she whispered. His hand rose to cover hers. "Maybe not," he murmured, "but they will remember this, and they will never question you again." Around them, the court remained silent, nobles bowing, heads lowered, none daring to look the king in the eye. The scent of fear filled the air. By the time the guards carried Titus's broken body away, one truth had settled in every heart present. Freya was no longer a slave. She was Luna, and the king who loved her had just shown the price of disrespect. The night was alive with silver fire. The full moon hung high over the glass dome of the sacred hall, its light pouring down like a waterfall of blessing. Every flicker of torchlight bent to its glow, illuminating the two figures standing at the heart of the circle, the Alpha King and the woman who had once been called a slave. Freya's heart pounded so loud she could barely hear the chanting of the priestesses. The scent of moon lilies filled the air, mingling with the wild pulse of her wolf. Eros stood before her, his golden eyes gleaming, his expression tender, yet fierce. Freya met his gaze, the man, the king, the wolf, and in that moment, the weight of her past melted away. She wasn't the girl from the market anymore, nor the branded slave. She was his equal, chosen not from pity, but from love. The high priestess raised her staff. Under the gaze of the moon goddess, the Alpha binds his soul to his Luna, and the Luna to her Alpha, blood to blood, light to light. Eros's claws extended, a sharp shimmer of power under the moonlight. He drew a small cut across his palm and across his shoulder, his voice low but steady. "With this mark, I give you my strength, my throne, and my heart." Freya reached for him, her own claws trembling. She mirrored his motion, her hand brushing his cheek before pressing her palm to his. Their blood mingled, gold and silver, fusing into a radiant glow that spiraled around them both. The crowd gasped as a wave of energy swept through the hall, rattling the torches, bending the light. The glass dome caught the moonlight and burst into 1,000 reflections, each shard showing the same image, the king and his queen, their souls bound as one. Then came the marking. Eros leaned in, brushing her hair aside. His fangs pierced her skin gently, his voice a whisper against her pulse. "Mine." The word wasn't dominance, it was devotion. It was a vow. Freya's breath caught, power flooding her veins. Her wolf stirred, no longer caged, no longer silent. She lifted her head and marked him in return, her bite delicate yet certain. "And I am yours." Their marks glowed like molten gold. The light rose higher and higher until it touched the moon itself, linking heaven and earth in a single beam. The goddess had answered. The priestess bowed. The bond is sealed. Eros turned, lifting the royal crown from its stand. He looked at Freya, and for the first time, the hall saw the king's eyes soften. "You once knelt in chains," he said, his voice echoing through the temple. "Now you stand above them all." He placed the crown upon her head. The hall erupted. Wolves howled, voices rose, the sound shaking the heavens. The people, once divided, bowed before their Luna. Freya felt her wolf surge within her, no longer a whisper but a roar. Power pulsed through her limbs, light spread through her chest. She lifted her face to the sky as her mark burned with moonlight, fierce, alive, eternal. She threw back her head and howled. The sound echoed beyond the walls, across the mountains, through every pack that once scorned her name. Wolves answered her from afar, an entire kingdom, howling in one united song. Eros's arm slid around her waist. His own howl joined hers, deep and powerful, merging with her cry until the night itself seemed to tremble. When the echoes faded, only silence and starlight remained. Freya turned to him, eyes shining with tears and strength. "I was born a slave," she whispered, "but tonight I am free." Eros smiled, resting his forehead against hers. "Not free, my love, sovereign." And as the moon bathed them in silver light, the Alpha King and his Luna stood together, not as ruler and servant but as equals, bound by love, chosen by fate, crowned by the goddess herself. The night air was calm, carrying the gentle hum of celebration from the village below. Laughter floated up from the courtyards where lanterns flickered like scattered stars. Catherine rested her palms on the marble railing, her heart swelling with gratitude. So much had changed. Once this kingdom had been divided by pride and cruelty. The strong ruled, and the weak were silenced. But Freya, a girl who had once been nothing more than a slave, had rewritten the very soul of their land. Her kindness had tamed arrogance, her courage had taught compassion. Inside the royal chambers, Freya sat near the window, her belly round with life, a gentle glow in her eyes as she traced circles on her stomach. Eros knelt beside her, reading softly from an old scroll of moon legends, his hand resting protectively over hers. The sight filled Catherine's chest with warmth so fierce it brought tears to her eyes. She remembered the night she disguised herself as a beggar, the hopelessness she had felt watching her son's loneliness consume him. The goddess had answered her prayer in the form of that quiet, stubborn girl who refused to bow even in chains. Now, that same girl was queen, and the child she carried was the dawn of a new era. Catherine whispered to the moon, her voice tender and full of reverence. "Thank you, goddess, for showing me that strength isn't born of blood, but of heart." A silver light shimmered across the balcony, as if the moon herself blessed her words. She turned her gaze to the courtyard, where wolves of every rank played together. No slaves, no masters, just one pack under the same sky. The laughter of the people rose like a hymn, a song of unity and rebirth. Freya's voice floated through the open window, soft and radiant. "Mother, come inside. He's kicking again." Catherine smiled, brushing away her tears as she turned toward the chamber. "Already strong like his father," she said. Eros chuckled, "and stubborn like his mother." Freya laughed, her joy filling the room with light. Catherine joined them, resting her hand gently over the unborn child. For a moment, the three of them stood bathed in moonlight, a family reborn, a kingdom renewed. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying a promise that would echo for generations. The era of freedom had begun, born from love, sealed by courage, and blessed beneath the eternal gaze of the moon goddess. If you enjoyed this series, tell me where you are watching from, favorite character, and your heart-stopping moment. We love reading your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to check out other amazing stories from the channel until we bring another love story your way. Bye for now.